What is up, guys? All right, so this is not the setup that I had planned for. If you caught my first, technically 2 live streams about 10 minutes ago, thank you for joining. Apologies for the technical difficulties because I don't know what's going on with it. It keeps playing back the audio from probably like 45 seconds after I said it, and it keeps clashing with the live stream, so I'm not entirely sure what the issue is, but fortunately I can still make this a video since some of you guys still voted for it to be an actual video. So if you joined the live, thank you for joining me during the technical difficulties and all. I'll get it one day, probably not today, but I will get it one day. But with that being said, we're gonna be talking about some unpopular horror opinions. So it's not really, this was kind of an impromptu video now that the live stream didn't work. So we're just gonna power through it. But if you didn't catch the first 2 opinions, or probably 4 that I had mentioned before, I just called it quits with the technical difficulties. We're gonna start off with my first unpopular opinion, which is that Scream 5 is not the best sequel since the first Scream movie. Now, I know that people's opinions might have changed now that Scream 5's been out since 2022, but yeah, I wasn't a fan of it after I rewatched it the 3rd time. I loved it on the first watch, but then it was during my second watch that I found there was a lot of issues with it. And after all of the time that I had to rewatch it and think about it, it just felt like a really soulless attempt at being a Scream movie. It did have quite a few things going for it. You had the legacy characters back, you had the Ghostface costume looking as iconic as ever. It's probably one of my favorite things about that movie. And you had a really good cast, but beyond that, everything else just really kind of fell flat for me. There's really not a lot of fun to be had in this movie either. I mean, I find myself constantly waiting for Judy and Wes to die together. It's really not a fun experience for me because a lot of the characters that I liked died, and I get that that's the point, but like whenever you watch Scream 6, another issue I have with that movie is that people can get stabbed like 10 times and be perfectly fine to get up and run. However, that movie gets a bit more points for me because it just has a lot more fun. No one gets people seriously get injured. I mean, no one dies, at least, not anyone important really, sorry Annika, but yeah, it just had a lot more fun. And I feel like if the 5th movie would have had those types of vibes and level of fun to it, it could have ended up being a lot better than what it actually was. But unfortunately, it just felt really soulless and it just felt very generic to me, especially since there were no chase scenes. I think that's why they added a bunch in Scream 6 to make up for the severe lack of them in 5. Ghostface also didn't feel very much like Ghostface in this movie, as far as like his personality. I get that it's a different person underneath, but you know, Ghostface is Ghostface. As far as the actual killers, they were fine. I love Mikey Madison, and I just think it is absolutely hysterical that she got burned alive twice in 2 movies now. Great. But yeah, other than that, this movie just really is not my favorite. And again, I'll still watch it because I mean, you know, it's a Scream movie, but do I enjoy watching it? I'm kind of just waiting for it to be over, but now that Scream 6 has come out, I do find that it is a nice bridge into Scream 6 because whenever you watch 6, you can appreciate a lot of the things that happened in 5 more. So it's not a total lost cause, but as far as being like a great sequel or the best since the original, it's just not it for me. All right, now moving on to my next unpopular horror opinion. All right, so to talk about my unpopular opinion about Barbarian, I would say that I could not find the love or even the hype for this movie. It was really hype because it had Bill Skarsgård in it. It was said to have this really cool twist and subvert your expectations and all that, and I was totally down to see it, and I was really let down. It just really felt boring to me. I mean, the story was pretty twisted and sick and everything, but I didn't really care for the twist. I mean, I get why the twist was like that. You probably were expecting something different when you first watched the movie. But unfortunately, the twist of the creature being in there and wanting it to be like a mom to its victims and everything, it just really didn't work for me, and it ended up just being really a little bit weird, and the ending just was incredibly cheesy. I can't believe that the mom would actually be able to save Tess diving off that water tower, which wasn't even that high up to begin with. And just the amount of shittiness they added to Justin Long's character was incredibly bad. He was already a pervert, he had sexually assaulted somebody, and he even tried to save himself by throwing Tess off of the water tower. I think it's safe to say that no one felt bad whenever his character was ripped in half. However, the shitty characters in this movie, the boring atmosphere, and the weird twist that comes like 50 minutes into the movie really didn't work for me. And I know that a lot of people really enjoy this movie, but it just wasn't for me. I don't know if that's considered unpopular, but I would say it is, since I usually see a lot of reviews praising this movie. But yeah, I just could not find the love for it. All right, moving on to my next unpopular horror opinion. I don't know if anyone's ever really talked about this, or maybe you have whenever the movies came out. I think that the Pennywise in the original It miniseries is creepier than Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise, and both of their performances are phenomenal. They both give a different flavor to Pennywise in the miniseries and in the new movies. However, there's just something very off-putting and creepy about a normal-looking clown versus a obviously scary-looking clown. I have no idea how those kids approach him in the new movies. There's just no way, not me. But there's just something so creepy about a clown that looks normal that would grab like a kid's attention to, you know, want to go and talk to or like get a balloon animal from. If you see, you know, the Bill Skarsgård Pennywise, you're probably not, you know, gonna go up to him, you know, just like super casually unless you're at like a horror convention. But with the Tim Curry Pennywise, just being so normal and super friendly with the kids from the get-go without any kind of like subtle creepiness like in the new movies, it's just really scary to me how easy it is for him to look so normal and be able to get those kids to go over to him. And yeah, there's just something super creepy about the original Pennywise that I just can't shake. No hate to Bill Skarsgård at all, but yeah, there's just something about the original Pennywise that really creeps me out. All right, moving on to my next unpopular opinion. I think that the original Conjuring should have been it for the Conjuring movies. Because like, let's be honest, I mean, the first movie is based, well, all three are based on true events. But I mean, come on, you know, it's slightly based on true events, you know, whenever you really look into it. And I think that the first movie really did a good job at being a horror movie while also seeming very close to the original events. And, you know, after reading about the actual Conjuring, you know, you can see that it's, you know, very dramatized for movies, which is fine. However, I feel like that with part 2 and 3, it really lost its realism, if there even was any. With the based on true events thing, the Enfield Poltergeist was a pretty good Conjuring movie. It did give us Valak, the Nun, which, I mean, that movie wasn't great though, to be honest, but I don't think anyone's gonna disagree if we talk about the Nun not being very good. But the character itself was very good here. However, I feel like it just didn't have the same strength and weight that the Conjuring 1 had. The family dynamic felt just a little bit weaker to me compared to the first one. So I just didn't really connect with it as much, and the scares felt a little bit more Hollywood, and that's totally what happened in the third one. Everything felt way more Hollywood, and they even made Lorraine seem incredibly psychic and clairvoyant to the point where she was almost like a superhero. That just didn't really work for me. I already find these movies not very realistic, but whenever you start throwing in stuff like that, it just kind of drags it down even a little bit more. But again, these aren't bad movies per se, because I really enjoy watching them. The characters are great. There's no doubt about that. It's just the fact that these movies aren't really scary anymore. I mean, the second one did have its moments, especially with Valak. However, with the third Conjuring, it just didn't feel scary at all. There was no parts at all during the movie where I felt scared. I mean, that could probably be because I'm getting older. However, the scares just felt incredibly different compared to the first one, which is, of course, by James Wan. So they're gonna feel different. But even the scares in the second movie didn't really feel as effective as the first movie. So with that being said, I think that while these are all great movies in their own right, I feel like the only one that's genuinely scary at periods of times is the first Conjuring. The second and third one are great movies on their own, but I think that it would have been a much stronger movie had it just stopped at the first movie. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't be open to the other Conjuring spin-off movies. I mean, I did like Annabelle Creation and Annabelle Comes Home. The original Annabelle does have some issues. I really feel like if they would have just focused more on these entities that they had talked about in the first movie, such as Annabelle, or other items that were inside of their secret room, I feel like spin-off movies could have been a much better idea, since it wouldn't have had so much focus on the Warrens. You could have focused maybe on the entity or the family that was dealing with it, and then kind of have the Warrens integrated in it sporadically, since I heard that in the second movie that in real life they weren't really even a main part of the actual investigation, maybe for like 1 or 2 days. I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that it wasn't at all the way that it was made out to be in the movie. So I feel like if they would have just stopped at the first Conjuring and maybe had spin-offs that were probably better than The Nun or the first Annabelle, they really could have had a much better Conjuring universe than they do currently, but that's a video for another day. Okay, now moving on to my next unpopular opinion. I don't know how many of you guys have seen it, probably a lot. I would say that the first season of the Chucky TV series was perfect on its own, and I think that season 2 kind of drug it down a little bit. And I don't even think I watched the last episode of season 2, but I think that if it would have been just like a one and done limited series, it could have been a lot better than dragging it out for 2 seasons, because season 1 really did feel like it had a lot of great ideas, and it was really fun, really funny, and even had some good scary tense moments. But I found that that was really lacking in the second season. The characters in season 1 felt way better, and it just was really interesting to see them grow and change over the first season. But in season 2, since there's been a hiatus since we've seen these characters, they've changed a lot, and it doesn't seem like they've changed for the better. They seem to be underdeveloped compared to how they were in the first season. Along with the scares and the comedic moments, it just didn't really hit for me the way that the first season did. It felt like there was a lot more love and creativity that was put into the first season. So I would say that while it might not be really like huge unpopular opinion, I would say that season 1 was way better than season 2, and it probably would have been better had they just done a limited series. And then if they would have just had a spin-off movie with Jake and his boyfriend and Lexi, I feel like that would have been pretty interesting, rather than just kind of dragging it out for another long season. Moving on to my next unpopular horror opinion, I would say that I think Jaws 2 is better than Jaws 1. Now, that's not to say that it's a better made movie, or that, not that it's like made any better or anything like that. It's just that it feels a lot more fun, and it just has more of a summer horror movie vibe. I don't know. The first movie feels a lot more like a drama to me, and the shark sequences are great and probably the scariest in the actual series for Jaws, because you probably know how 3 and 4 go. But Jaws 2, something about it, maybe it's because I watched it the most when I was a kid, but something about them being in the middle of the ocean with the shark following them on boats and everything, it definitely doesn't probably make as much sense as the first Jaws, but it was a lot more fun for me. I loved the characters. I loved that we were able to get more time with Michael and the teens. It felt just a lot more fun. The first one did have its great moments, but it just really seemed to drag for me in between those great moments. The second one didn't really seem to slow down at any point. It really just kept up with the speed and focused a lot more on the aspects with the shark and everything. So I tend to have a lot more fun with Jaws 2. I know that Jaws is a classic and it's a really great movie. There's no denying that, but if I were to choose to watch the first or second one, I would choose the second one because it's just more fun. All right, so we're coming at the end of my list for my unpopular horror opinions. Again, I did not plan to have such frustrating technical difficulties, but gotta roll with it. So my next unpopular horror opinion, and I've waited on this one for a little bit just so we're almost at the end of the list, but Sidney Prescott is my favorite final girl. I know that Laurie Strode is the OG. There's no doubt about that. Nancy Thompson is also a great final girl, but there's just something about Sidney Prescott that is really great. She's been a fighter since the first movie. She's even been able to escape the killer multiple times when the odds were against her, although you could argue that they weren't necessarily trying to kill her, rather scare her before the final act, but she still did use her wits and fight in her to get away from the killer. And as the movies progress, you can see that she goes from being scared of the killer to now actively hunting the killer down. It's really noticeable in Scream 4 whenever she just goes goes and tries to save Olivia herself. Even though she's unsuccessful, she did show that she's not only not scared anymore, but that she's willing to put herself in the line of fire to protect someone else against the new Ghostface. So that just really shows me that she's not only the best final girl, she's definitely not scared to fight anymore, and it's really nice to see her going after the killer herself instead of running from the killer. It's nice that she's flipped it around after all these years, and with the exception of 6, she's actively searching for the killers herself, rather hiding. I know that Laurie Strode came first, technically, in Halloween 2018 as well, and that you could say that Sidney in Scream 5 had a lot of inspiration from there. That probably is true. However, there's just something about Sidney Prescott's history that's made her such an iconic final girl, especially since these movies are supposed to take place in our universe. It really just adds to it, and it really does make her my favorite final girl. Speaking of final girls though, I do have an idea of doing a top 5 final girls video. If you guys are interested in that, definitely let me know down in the comments below, because I would love to talk about my top 5 final girls. You probably already know my first pick, but there are 4 other final girls that I really love and would really love to talk about with you guys. So if you want to see a video like that, definitely let me know down in the comments below. All right, on to my final unpopular horror opinion. This one's probably like the one I'm most nervous about because I feel like it could offend a lot of people. Maybe it's just because it wasn't my time. I have seen both, but I think that Paranormal Activity is the best found footage horror movie, not the Blair Witch Project, which I know that a lot of y'all swear by. I do understand why it gets the love that it gets. It's probably the most realistic found footage movie I've ever seen, probably because it was also in the 90s. A lot of people believed that this was genuinely a real thing and that these people died or disappeared. So that's pretty cool that the movie actually had that effect on people in real life. But now that it's 2022, movies age no matter what. And this one doesn't age badly necessarily. It's just, I get that the less is more is very prevalent in this movie. However, there's only so many times that you can do that before it starts to get a little bit stale. And it really just loses steam for me more towards the end than the beginning, actually, because in the beginning, again, I never really knew anything about this movie when I saw it because I was so young. I think I was like 12. So I wasn't really knowing what to expect, but the way that the movie built up at first and hearing about the witch and everything, I thought that it was going to be really scary and thought it was building up to something really interesting and creepy and stuff. But whenever the movie kept going and going, even being young, I noticed that there wasn't probably gonna be any kind of visuals or anything that we were gonna see. It was about what you don't see. I probably didn't get that whenever I was younger, but I did rewatch it probably 2 years ago. And again, the same thing for me. Once the movie started getting towards the end, I just really kind of felt disappointed because I'd already known that we don't see the witch, and again, you probably wouldn't want to, given how you feel about the movie. It's probably scarier if you don't. But I was just envisioning something super scary in my head that it just didn't live up to what we saw, unfortunately. But that's a different story with Paranormal Activity. I don't know if I'm like a weirdo, but before I met Trini, I actually literally used to sleep with like my blanket, something covering my ear, because for the longest time, I was scared of just hearing something whisper in my ear. So I, like my 10-year-old self thought that like putting a blanket over my ear would stop a ghost from doing that. But the point is that there's a lot of scary things in this movie that felt just so real to life, like hearing something in your house and not being sure on whether or not you actually heard it, or finding something out of place and thinking that you did it or questioning it. But especially in the bedroom with those night scenes, there's just something really creepy about being in your bedroom and your bed where you're supposed to feel probably the safest in your home, and that's whenever you're wrong. It just really hits all the notes for me because you are watching this movie. It just really hits for me and has a more home video feel to it compared to the Blair Witch Project. This one feels a lot more genuine, and it may have even had a smaller budget than Blair Witch. I'm not sure on that, but it definitely feels a lot more realistic. You're in only one location, which is the house, so you feel somewhat claustrophobic. So it really just felt a lot more real to me and a lot scarier to me, and probably because I watched it when I was so young, but it still stuck with me. I like to rewatch it and see if I can pick up on things that maybe I didn't pick up on the first watch of Paranormal Activity. The sequels are a different story. 2, I love solely for Allie. She's one of my favorite characters of the Paranormal Activity franchise. She adds a fun vibe to it. The third movie, that one's probably the one that scared me the most. We saw it in theaters, and I had nightmares forever about the old ladies in the cult walking down that hallway towards Dennis. I had nightmares about it forever. That's probably the one that scared me the most as a kid, with the exception of the first movie. But the fourth movie, I'm not a huge fan of. I love Catherine Newton, and I loved her in Freaky and everything, but this one just didn't really feel as scary anymore. It felt like it was almost running out of ideas, especially with the connection to the second movie. It just didn't really connect very well. Fifth movie is probably my favorite out of the entire franchise, solely because it's fun and takes full advantage of its new atmosphere and setting. So I definitely would probably say that The Marked Ones is my favorite. Ghost Dimension, yeah, I think there's already enough to say about the Ghost Dimension. I think that we could probably skip discussion on the Ghost Dimension altogether, because what even was that movie? All right, well, that pretty much wraps up this video. Again, I'm so sorry if it feels thrown together. This, again, was not supposed to go this way, so it was a bit impromptu. But if you guys did check out my live stream, thank you for joining. And if you clicked on this video, again, thank you. All the support means a lot to me. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because it really helps me out a lot, and hit the notifications bell so you know whenever I post new videos. I really hope that I didn't offend too many of you with my unpopular horror opinions, or if they were even that unpopular. I don't know, but if you have any, let me know down below what your unpopular horror opinions are. Those are always fun to read, and maybe in a future video I can react to them. So that could be a fun idea too, but just let me know. I'm always open to suggestions. But that's pretty much it for you guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.